Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to another video. We're going to be reading chapter 15 in A Guide for Lightworkers by Archangel Michael, channeled and also written by Saratoga Ocean. So chapter 15, we're going to be talking about the ego again. And before we get started, let's go ahead and take a moment to set our intention to take all of this information in with our hearts rather than with our minds. Okay? So with that intention in mind, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 15, the ego. The subject of the ego is perhaps one of the most important things to understand if you are to achieve any level of mastery in this lifetime. In order to understand it, we must first discuss a few things about the nature of a human being. We will dispel a few myths along the way. Let us begin with one of the most grave and erroneous assumptions that human beings have made about themselves. There exists a very prevalent mindset here that has been around for a very long time. And this is in quotations. If it exists in a human being, then we must include it as part of the nature of what it means to be human. Now, this is very tricky because when you take that sentence at face value, it sounds very scientific and intelligent, doesn't it? This statement is usually followed by, so of course, since God created everything that exists in this so-called human nature must have been created by God. And an additional follow-up, a statement claims, since good and evil both exist in humankind, then it means that God must have created human beings with both good and evil. Have you understood enough in reading so far to finally know why that statement is erroneous? Just a little test to see if you've been paying attention, but if not, don't worry, I am happy to explain. It goes without saying that love cannot beget hate. Likewise, love cannot beget evil. So where do these things come from? Well, in truth, they don't come from anywhere because by definition, they exist as the absence of something. Let us go back to the beginning. If you say, I am not omnipresence, it is the same as saying, I am not infinite. It is likewise the same as saying, I am not love, since God is infinite, omnipresent love. I am not love can only mean one thing. I am therefore the absence of love. Now think this through, dearest friends. Is there such a thing as the absence of anything really? Or does the absence of anything really refer to nothing? If you say, I am not there, are you there or are you completely absent from wherever there is? And if you are absent from wherever there is, can anyone find that you exist in that place? Of course not. It could be easily stated that you literally do not exist wherever there is. If someone insisted that your absence in that place was indeed a presence of some kind, you would clearly see that they were in some sort of an illusion to believe such a thing. Why? Because there is really nobody there. In its most graphic sense, you would have to say that it was a lie to say that your absence in that place was really a presence. That is how the illusion of the finite works. There is no such thing as not infinite because infinite means everywhere. How could there exist the absence of the infinite? Yet that is what the finite pretends to be. Thus, it exists as a massive illusion. For those who think that the infinite has something to do with numbers, it doesn't. It refers to the omnipresent state of God, which is love. The fact that you perceive yourself to be living in a non-infinite state puts you immediately into an illusion of separation from God, the infinite omnipresence of love. Do you see how that works? This separation then begins to manifest at every level of consciousness as an irreconcilable duality. This duality begins with your erroneous perception that you are not God. The perception that you are not infinite is why you manifest a finite body for your infinite self. How's that for a major duality? Thus, you struggle to reconcile the inherent knowledge that you don't feel any older, and you, of course, wish to keep on living forever. Yet you look in the mirror and see this strange body of yours aging and eventually dying. What in the world is that all about? You wonder about it in amazement until you finally feel forced to accept it. But it confuses you, doesn't it? What is the point in dying anyway? You were just starting to get the hang of living on this planet. Why go now? So let us focus on this inherent duality in order to understand the ego. This understanding must start with the full recognition that you are an infinite being. This is not philosophical conjecture. There is clear evidence to this fact that exists in your everyday experience. You do not relate to aging. You do not relate to dying. In fact, in your so-called youth, it is nearly impossible for you to imagine such things. You do not understand why you cannot eat anything you want just for the fun of it. What is this familiar thing of needing to take care of and preserve a body? You are more than happy to pretend that sleep is optional if there are other things that you'd rather be doing. Muscle atrophy? You mean I have to intentionally exercise in order to prevent it? These, my dear friends, are all concerns that do not exist in the real world of infinite love, where all sustains because it exists as what it is rather than what it isn't. You come here familiar with the infinite because it's who you are. So now you find yourself here again with yet another earth body living in the finite. The only problem is that you have forgotten everything you learned the last time because you are basically starting all over again in a new body. So you rummage around in the darkness trying to remember who you are and why you're here for the umpteen millionth time. Enter the ego to help you out. What exactly is the ego? It exists as an alternate identity whose role it is to help you navigate through the finite. The ego is the opposite of you because it completely understands and subscribes wholeheartedly to the finite world of illusion. There are people who say that the ego is vital and important because it is what provides a person with their sense of identity. Indeed, this is true. The only problem is that it is a false identity, which is made up of mostly who you're not. Have you ever noticed that the ego always speaks to you in dual terms? If you are good, it's because someone else is bad. If you are bad, it's because someone else is better than you. The ego always speaks in irreconcilable terms of differences and separation. How does the ego get created? Again, we must observe the strange new laws of physics that are created by the first original lie of I am not. Remember that I am not infinite produces an immediate illusion of the absence of God and the real world. You, who are an infinite being, must find an alternate identity in order to know who you are in this finite world. That identity gets created automatically by default. It represents wherever the infinite you is absent in the finite world. It is the reason that there is so much confusion around the body. People identify themselves as being their bodies, and then they are shocked when something happens to it or when it physically perishes. They simply can't believe it. This confusion is the result of the dual reality that gets created when infinite consciousness attempts to live through the illusion of a finite body. This body is then piloted by a false identity to account for it all. So, no, you are definitely not crazy when you find yourself shocked at the so-called natural degradation of your physical finite body. It is simply who you are, an infinite being of love who knows nothing about entropy, death, and destruction. The illusion will always shock you, no matter how many times you experience it. Hopefully now you have some degree of clarity about the difference between you and this false illusion of the finite. And if you do, then perhaps you are ready to examine where you personally stand with this peculiar false identity known as the ego. Do you know about the voice in your head? Of course you do. It's the one that talks to you all day long and sometimes all night long. It's like a little general, always barking orders and informing you about what's really going on. It is the great interpreter that substitutes for pure knowledge and consciousness. It eclipses clarity and creates confusion by casting doubt on everything that you would naturally be sure of. Think you want to pursue the profession of your dreams? The ego is happy to protect you from failure by letting you know what a failure you already are, so you won't waste time trying, only to fail again. See how helpful it can be? It has just helped protect you from all that pain. The ego creates enormous confusion because it produces an illusion that you have two identities. One is your true identity, which is that of your infinite self, and the other is what is known as your false identity, which is that of the ego. The true identity, which is centered in your heart, is one of peace, love, and creativity. It is one of hope and eternal inspiration. It exists at the seat of your true intelligence. It judges no one, and it never wishes ill upon anyone. It is completely secure in the knowledge of the infinite God and divine love. It does not know fear. The false identity, on the other hand, is that which is created to operate in the finite and ensure that you are well situated in all of its duality. It manipulates you through fear and judging others. It interprets every situation as one of haves and have-nots. It does not care if you are happy or miserable. Its only goal is to preserve itself. People are fond of saying, everyone has an ego, it's a part of life, and therefore we must learn to live with it. But it is vitally important to understand why it is there and for what purpose. Its purpose is to ensure your dedication to this finite illusion. That is why it always speaks in irreconcilable terms of good, bad, right, wrong, hate, love, and life, death. I'm so sorry, my daughter, she is on the phone with her girlfriends. Something's very funny, so I apologize that it might get a little girl noisy back there. These dualities can never be reconciled with one another, and thus you remain forever trapped in this finite illusion. The erroneous way that you have attempted to reconcile these dualities is primarily through religion and various brands of spirituality. Primarily, the gist is to say that God has ordained all of this for a very good reason, which is fill in the blank. In this case, God is not the God of infinite love. On the contrary, this God exists as the very same illusion that promoted the first original lie. This God represents an allegiance to the finite. Now, many of you believe that the answer to this state of dual realities is to bring more love and light into this planetary sphere of existence. This is absolutely noble and helpful, but as you can see by the world around you, this is not nearly enough. Until the core principle that is creating all of this is directly addressed, the love that you bring in will be heavily resisted as a threat to that which you have termed the darkness, which in reality is merely the absence of truth. Again, the I am not. Love is pure presence. I am not. Love is pure absence. This absence is created by the lie of not, or the resistance to that truth. This is why prayer and the angelic kingdom are so important to you now. The context of your prayer is vital. It can either be a context of supporting and excusing the death and destruction inherent in the finite world, in which case you will continue to receive the help that you ask for in dealing with it as best you can. Or the context of your prayer can be profoundly expanded. You can actually pray for the final elimination of the principle that sources this mass illusion of death and destruction. But in order to do that, you will have to sacrifice your notion of human guilt. Your consciousness will have to change to one of recognition of what is really going on in this universe in order to pray the powerful prayers that you are truly capable of. The ego does not want you to recognize this. The day that you do, its demise is imminent. It can only exist as a product of the lie of what you are not. It can never exist as the truth of what you are. Now let me say something about the truth of that which is I, Archangel Michael. Allow me to offer you an example of the limited condition that your formerly small context of prayer has produced. If you pick up any published book informing you about the various natures and the so-called specialties of your beloved guardian angels, you will no doubt find a passage about myself. Archangel Michael is here to help you with your fears. This belief comes from a completely erroneous context that presumes that the whole universe subscribes to your current rationale, that you must learn to cope, adapt, and somehow overcome these obstacles in your lives. I am here to inform you that there is a far greater possibility than these, and until you entertain that possibility, you will continue to struggle and live in the darkness produced by this finite illusion. Your angels are dear and powerful friends who have capabilities that can only be limited in terms of their response to the limitations of your requests for help. As long as the entire world refuses to take seriously what Yeshua, or Jesus, and others like him proved to you beyond any shadow of a doubt, you will continue to pray prayers of weakness and guilt. The results of those prayers can only match the magnitude of prayers themselves, or of the prayers themselves. Why? Because, as you well know, you are the one who ultimately determines your destiny, collectively and individually. That destiny is determined by your heart. If your allegiance remains with the ego instead, you will remain frustrated, confused, and unable to surrender to love. The ego will always present you with the dualities of good, bad, right, wrong. That is a trap that has no door. As long as you continue to follow it, you can never get out. What we are proposing to you is the possibility that you can listen to the truth that your heart holds within, and in doing so, you can lift your head above the smoke and mirrors of the ego and finally experience the tremendous power and peace afforded to you by clarity and oneness of perception. You do not have to buy into the false duality that the ego presents you with every day and at every moment. We strongly encourage you to consider this possibility, perhaps for the first time ever. Your heart and you are one and the same. Your heart can only want love because it is love. So this is not a matter of coming up with something new. It is a matter of what you are allied with. The ego exists as a manifestation of the source of fear. Pay attention to how much it tries to intimidate either yourself or others. Pay attention to the fact that it will happily crucify you or someone else. It doesn't care about pain or suffering. It doesn't care if it keeps you up all night telling you how hopeless things are or how you royally messed things up. It is more than happy to intimidate you into self-repression out of a fear of not being good enough. On the other hand, it is happy to repeatedly manifest for you the famous saying, "Pride goes before a fall." It will set you up for that again and again if you let it. And why, after all, do you need a voice in your head instead of pure consciousness and knowing? It is because the ego exists as not you, and it must therefore remind you of its existence on a wholly perpetual basis. All right, so that completes chapter 16. I really enjoy learning about the ego. I actually saw a post on Facebook from somebody that I'm friends with, and she posted something about like how her ego is who she is, and I just wanted to shout out, like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And she's a really sweet person, and I didn't mean it anything like that. And it comes from a place of what we're taught as far as like your ego and your pride and all of this and that really goes into play when it comes to certain things, and certain cultures and certain genders tend to be really big on the pride and the ego as something to be proud of. So I really understood on a deep level what this is trying to tell me, and I hope that you guys do too. And I wonder if the subject of the ego and learning more about it is something that interests you a lot, because it definitely has piqued my interest far more than many of the other chapters. And the funny thing is, the ego is talked about in many of these chapters. So I enjoy learning more about it. It can only, I would hope, help me be a better person in many ways, not on a surface level, not as far as personality traits go, but me, the essence of me and where everything comes from, and not allowing it to come from a different place in everything I do, in every decision I make. So this definitely gives me some things to think about, and I hope that it does for you as usual. And I think I have said this before, but many words and phrases are reused quite a bit in this book. It is mentioned in the introduction, and there is a reason for this. So I just wanted to let you know, in case you've heard many words or terms and you're wondering why they can't think of anything else to use. It's certainly not the case. And I hope that this book can resonate with more and more people, and that you understand that even though it says it's a guide for light workers, a light worker, according to this book, according to Archangel Michael and the Channeler, is anyone who wants to bring more light, more love, more positivity, more care into the world, more than any of the opposites. They want to bring all of the goodness and the light that they can to anyone and everyone, and enlighten whoever wants to be. So that's a light worker. And I think that this book is good for light workers, but I also think anyone can benefit from the information in this book on a deep level that maybe they did not expect. So hopefully you are benefiting from this book the way that I am. I always take something away from any book of this kind of genre that I read. And in the next chapter, which is chapter 17, I think, let's see. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're going to be reading chapter 16 next. And this one is going to be piquing. This one's piquing my interest as well. It's The Purpose of Life, chapter 16. So we will read that together next. For now, I am going to go to bed. And I hope that you all have a wonderful, beautiful rest of your day and night. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Please like, subscribe, comment. I would definitely love and appreciate that, and would love to hear from anyone, anybody. I would love any comments. That would be great. I would like to interact with anyone who's watching these videos and kind of see where they're at with, their opinions and their thoughts. So until next time, again, take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.